Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with yet another Tim May podcast. And I have one of my favorite co-pilots joining me again this week. You knew him as number 35 on that 2002 national championship team at Ohio State, the team that kind of came out of nowhere, won games by the hair of their chinny chin, and went on to become national champions with one of the great victories of all time in Ohio State history, beating Miami in that 2 overtime thriller in the Fiesta Bowl. Matt Wilhelm, welcome again to the Tim May podcast, my man.
Always great to be with you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, I had to jump, grab you late. I like to schedule these things a little bit, but man, you and I are texting there in the first half, especially on Saturday, as Ohio State is struggling to get going against Penn State, both offensively and defensively, but then got it going, comes up with a 44-31 win. And, even on our website here, lettermenrow.com that I work for, it's funny because the headline on the Ryan Day press conference video says Buckeyes, something about Buckeyes pull out narrow win. And I go, 13 points is a narrow win in Happy Valley?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Right.
But just first, what's your take on a 13-point win being a narrow win? And it probably felt like that to you, did it?
It did. And I think, you and I have talked probably, over the last couple of years, and I think we've been extremely spoiled at Ohio State. And I would go back all the way to the Urban Meyer era at Ohio State with, 30-point victory after 30-point victory. And then when you finally get challenged, everyone's shaking in their boots with some type of concern. And I think, and you look at, what Ryan Day's message is each and every week, it's that competitive greatness, that they talk about is like working diligently to be their best. And in some cases, surviving, because that's really what the BCS was about. Yep. It's really now what college football playoff is about. If you do lose, I'll say, like Bama did lose, it's when did you lose? Did you lose late? Did you lose in a conference championship? Because that's what costs you an opportunity to become one of those 4 teams. But we did not lose. We won. And I think in some cases we won convincingly. And to just briefly get into this game, and I'll even go backwards to the Iowa game. And it was a little bit of my concern going into Happy Valley against Penn State. It's what's going to be my concern also maybe going to Maryland. My concern, and you mentioned before we jumped on air about some folks talking about Michigan is, and I listen to Joe Klatt. I think Joe Klatt is great at what he does, both his podcast and what he does online socially, and then his ability to call games. Huge fan of Ohio State, huge advocate for what Jim Knowles has done defensively, and of course CJ Stroud in that offense that has been so great. But what I was a little fearful of coming out of that 55-10 victory of Iowa was, did Iowa pull out a template that could limit us offensively? And now, yes, we did explode, right? And I think it was just because, we are significantly more talented. We're significantly better coached, and Iowa's just stuck in the 1995 and the way that football was played then. And it's the reason why, Kirk Ferentz's son's job is being called for there, right? And a change is needed. But I just think defensively, they were stout up front. They took away the run. They didn't chase, which I think what Ryan Day each and every week with these amazing receivers that Ohio State has, in Harrison and Agukpa and Fleming, and when Smith and Jigba's healthy, is they are not only faster and more technically sound than, most other receivers at the college football level. We're running NFL type concepts, that cause confusion and force communication between defenders. That's safety linebacker, that's linebacker corner, that's corner safety. And they're passing these routes in man or zone concepts. And what Iowa did is Iowa just dropped into stagnant zone coverage and closed windows.
Yep.
And as you heard, I think it was Klatt and Gus Johnson on the game as well, just talking about just having their eyes on Stroud and mirroring. And it's what I did as a zone defender, as an underneath zone defender, is just getting back into my zone and feeling the routes, not chasing anything, but having vision on the quarterback on where he's looking to go with the football. And it was closing those windows. And you saw us struggle offensively. And what I was afraid of, and I think in many cases it's what we saw at Penn State, I would say the NFL, it's a copycat league. And so what teams are going to do is they're going to use, and in Penn State you saw better talent using a Iowa type of game plan to limit us offensively early, to force us to throw. They even got some pressure with those superior athletes. You saw how little blitz happy the Nittany Lions got in the first half, and kind of we didn't see the Heisman candidate, Heisman frontrunner for that matter, CJ Stroud in the first half. We saw a lackluster inability to run the football, and other than throwing the ball to what seems to be the best receiver in football in the college game right now, in Marvin Harrison, making miraculous catch after miraculous catch, it was a very stagnant offense. But that being said, where I believe Ohio State will always have the advantage, even going back to my time there, is because of the level of players, their football acumen, and of course the coaching, is their ability to go in at halftime, whether they're down 1 or a touchdown or up 1 and up 14, is and the game just seems a little bit, they're a little offbeat and they're getting played extremely tough by whatever the opponent may be, is our ability to go in, decipher how they're attacking us or what they're doing against us, and then Ryan Day and his coordinators, Jim Knowles and his defensive coaches, changing things up, changing gaps, moving gaps, bringing a blitz where we think we can be successful, or running routes that beat zone, and not running man type concepts, and coaching up our guys. And then you just see what we always see is like and Joe Klatt, it's like the avalanche of scoring. It's Travion, you stuff him, he pops for 41 yards, and it's like you can throw the hitch, and then we'll get behind you, and we've got players that make one guy miss, and and a Gukba touchdown for 60 yards changes the way the game, the scope. And I think to this point, and I know I'm getting a little long-winded, but to talk about JTT, and I think it's the first time, we've heard JTT and Jack Sawyer were, the top 2 defensive ends, almost two of the top 3 defensive ends in last year's recruiting class in the entire country. And I think it's the first time that either of them have had that a dude 5-star wow performance that Buckeye Nation got so excited about when they originally verbally committed and then signed in that class.
Yeah.
But then I also flip, and you just look at, I have the stats up in front of me. You look at what JTT did, and then you look at Jack Sawyer. Jack Sawyer's got 1 total tackle, and it was like an assist, not even a solo. So we are still a work in progress. And I think the great thing about all of this, and we can punch holes in being 8-0 as much as we want, we are still, and I'll use, joke that on that collision course for an opportunity to represent the Big Ten East in the Big Ten championship game. And then we all know what that means for the college football playoff against that team up north.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a minute. I want to take you back to JT Tuimoloau. Like you just said, you waited all year for that to kind of happen. You saw some signs last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. People forget, I've brought this up on a couple of other platforms since the game. People forget he signed with Ohio State in July. His intention was to come in and maybe and play football and possibly get to play basketball. You follow my drift there. He had not been through the Mickey Marotti car wash,
right,
starting in January, like almost everybody else on that team had been. I'm talking about freshmen.
Sure.
But you saw him play immediately because he has that ability. You saw him get into the rotation because.
And also, Tim, also interrupt. I think those guys playing as true freshmen is part of what schools like Ohio State have to almost guarantee these 5-star kids to get them to commit, because if they don't, they know they could go somewhere else and start immediately.
But also on the practice field. But this, you're Larry Johnson, and the defense coordinator last year will first Kerry Combs and then Matt Barnes. There's something special about this guy, even if he hasn't grown into his body yet. You know what I mean? There's something you see something special that sets him apart from maybe 6 other guys standing there. And so you do want to get him online, but then he goes through a winter of conditioning. Like I said, the Mickey Marotti car wash, it comes out of it. He's a much different physical looking guy than he was a year ago. Weight wise, about the same, maybe a little bit heavier, but strength wise, you can see him reproportioned, right? And now you couple that with some ridiculous natural ability. And I really believe these guys that come off the edges, the Bosa brothers, Chase Young, even Mike Vrabel, they are blessed with this combination of lower body strength that comes almost naturally, which gives them that bull rush kind of aspect. But then the flip side of it is that quickness, that quick twitch that gets him around a guy, and lets him be able to leap tall buildings with a single bound. And I just think it all came together on the pregame show I was on. I'm on a pregame show every week, and I predicted that JT Tuimoloau was going to have a big game on it because I just like that matchup against that right tackle, especially.
Sure, absolutely. And I think the one thing that I would say up to this point, and again, from an extremely critical set of eyeballs, which is what I would say would have. I would say to a certain extent, like, I was a little disappointed by our front four, rushing four, because we rushed four, the 3 down, and that Jack linebacker, which happens to be either Jack Sawyer or JTT, and bring 4 and drop 7, and we haven't manipulated or manufactured, a lot of rush with just 4, right?
Yeah.
Which we always did with, and we've been spoiled with both Rosa brothers having 3 years of each of them, right? And then
Yes.
Chase Young for another 3 years. So we've been extremely spoiled. Or you're talking about the Vrabel era, and even in my era, you're talking about Will Smith and Kenny Peterson.
I brought him up too.
And so I think that we've always had to bring. That's why you see Steel Chambers fitting, or Eichenberg being as active as a fitter, whether it's like a blitzing the back if the back's staying in. Or used to call it green dog in the back, or they're adding him in some way and bringing 5, which causes a little bit of confusion for, guard, center, guard on who's blocking who with some type of twist. But it really was up to this point, and I think it came at the biggest moment, which is great because that avalanche where the offense finally clicks, you get the Travion Henderson big run, you get a stop, and you go down the field, you get the ball back, you score again, and then JTT does what he does. And I think now it completely flips the narrative because, yes, we win by 13. We probably gave them that I don't want to call it a garbage time touchdown because they went down the field, pretty easily, in like a 4-minute offense and went and scored. But to make it a 3-score game, that showed not only Buckeye Nation and other Big Ten opponents, but nationally watching that football game, that we are a complete football team, that we can essentially score on any drive, which we've kind of done up to this point, especially down in the red zone. We were darn near perfect. Score whenever we want offensively, and then the defense, especially, and I think that stat was up during the Fox broadcast, was the amount of turnovers that we've produced in the last 2 weeks. And I know Iowa's Iowa, right? But then we did the same thing to a very good, 13th ranked team in the country in Penn State. Is the ability for, as good as our offense is, we now have a defense that gets the football, not only gets off the field, but then gets turnovers and gives it back to this high-powered offense, which is debilitating for the opponent.
Yeah.
To give Stroud the football 2 extra times the football game, or to give Travion or Marvin Harrison those offensive opportunities, and Ryan Day and his ability to call the game 2 more opportunities, that you don't count on if you don't get those turnovers, our defense has been able to produce. And I think that they it's football. Everything can't end in a blowout, And I think anytime it gets a little uncomfortable for Buckeye fans, all we want to do is try to poke holes in our product. And our product is 8-0. And we're holding tight. And I think, and this is the best thing I can say, I'm very excited to watch Georgia, Tennessee, because us Buckeye fans know our team at this point after 8 games, who we are and who we're not, or what we can't do and what our strengths and weaknesses are. And then you're able to go watch 2 of the teams that you likely you could meet at some point amongst the top 4 if we continue to take care of our business, and they do as well, like exactly how we will match up and have to handle their strengths and find out about what their weaknesses are, so that what that might look like and really our confidence to win a national championship, 6-8 weeks from now.
Yeah. But hey, real quick before we move on to that, I want to ask you this. Back to Tuimoloau. He has a bull rush where he strips the quarterback, reaches around, strips the quarterback, falls on it. Before that, he had a tip of would-be screen pass that Zach Harrison then catches. He drops off into zone coverage, like you just said, playing a little jack position, has one of the great diving interceptions. I don't care if it's a cornerback. He has one of the great diving interceptions I've ever seen. Such an athletic move. And then he intercepts a screen pass, jumps into the air, intercepts a screen pass, and runs it in for a touchdown. I mean, I'm sure I'm leaving out a couple of plays, but that display was so diverse. You know what I mean? It wasn't him bull rushing every down and getting into the quarterback's face. It was such a display of athletic and football acumen. I wrote today, I've never seen that before. I've seen combos, like I said. I've seen Chase Young make 2 or 3 plays in a game. You go, wow. I saw the Bosa brothers do that. Who knows what Nick Bosa would have done if he'd gotten to play that entire third year, but he left after 3 games after getting that injury, and Will Smith, I think that's the benchmark for just getting after it, physical play. And I go back to Mike Vrabel, others, there are others that you could, but everything he put on display there.
Yes.
Was that impressive to you, Matt?
It was absolutely impressive to me. And the greatest thing about his performance is the domino effect of what happens to everybody else.
Yeah.
Because as I said, really by having JTT be who he's been up to this point, and having Zach Harrison be who he's been, and having Jack Sawyer, it's like all 3 of them in their own regards have produced, but now you have an alpha that's kind of set themselves apart. So every game, every offensive coach or offensive coordinator or head coach who happens to be on the offense side of the ball goes, that's the guy. That's the dude we have to block because of how disruptive he was against Penn State. And you have to account for him in the rush. You have to account for him in the coverage because he showed you a very diverse skill set by being able to win one-on-one, make a play in multiple ways, essentially. And truthfully, it makes life easier on the other 10 because now JTT is going to get a tackle and chipped by the back, or he's going to get the tackle and the tight end's going to have to chip him and be laid out into his route underneath in some cases to limit his productivity. So what does that do? That the domino effect I'm talking about is so then Zach Harrison's going to get a one-on-one. That means Hall's going to get a one-on-one on inside, right? Because the amount of attention that you have to give him, you have to account for him now in coverage. And there's just a lot of layers to the defense that having that performance from this point forward, and it's almost great that it's come with the stakes only getting higher for this team because the offense will continue to be who they are. But for the defensive guys, I think it's going to allow Coach Knowles to just continue to dig deeper into this playbook as if he's not already deep enough, but to give opportunities for other guys to win their one-on-one matchup. And because we recruit elite talent, that's what they've come to Ohio State to do. JTT stepped up in his own way. He produced. He will now there'll be bells and whistles for the offense every time. You're going to see quarterbacks from this point forward pointing out where he's at, to account for in the rush or potentially, in coverage, which will only allow other playmakers on our defense to continue to contribute. And then it's really the perfect storm. Now you have to, so you get Jack Sawyer to have a similar day, a 2-sack day, and JTT being JTT. It's the perfect storm.
Yeah. Yeah. And dude, remember the week before, he's the guy that caused the Iowa quarterback to kind of step a little bit and throw that interception to Eichenberg.
Yep.
Out of nowhere, and Eichenberg goes in for a touchdown. So he's really helped.
But dude, so that up to this point, if you went back, and I know I watched the game through a different set of lenses, and it's why I think it's so great for him to have the game that he had this past Saturday is because if you look how often JTT and Jack Sawyer and Zach Harrison are close to getting a sack. They win their one-on-one and get so close, and the football comes out just before they get there.
Yeah.
And really, that's the push-pull is coverage does well enough for him to hold the ball that one more beat, which then allows that play to get made by your pass rushers or vice versa. Yeah. And I think so that's, again, it cannot be happening, or this performance couldn't have happened at a better time. Because, again, against Arkansas State, you just kind of go, whatever. It happens against – I don't even know if it happens against Iowa in a 55-10 victory. If you're really you're like, okay, great. You're beating an extremely inferior opponent. In this case, half these kids from Penn State were also in on Ohio State from a recruiting standpoint. I'm sure JTT, and James Franklin, had opportunity to go to Penn State. He chose Ohio State. And so it's nationally televised. It's number 2 getting tested by the number 13 team in the country. And it's a W for us and a passing grade for all.
Yeah. As a buddy of mine, Jeff Snook, he's a big Ohio State fan, but he's also a big critic. But he pointed out before the game to me, hey, you win by 1 point at Penn State. People are going to take their shots. All you want is that W walking out of that place. But now, in retrospect, I want to ask you this. What bothered you about this Ohio State defense? What was exposed by Penn State, because I remember I asked Jim Knowles, I asked Ryan Day, I even asked a couple of the players leading up to the game, hey, this is the first offense you're going against. I'm paraphrasing what I was asking them. I was basically pointing out Toledo at 65 was the highest rated team offense they'd gone against in total offense, 65th in the country going into that game. And Penn State was sitting there like 48, 49. You know what I mean? That even changed from Friday night to Saturday in the NCAA rankings. They were 48 to 49, but it was still a step up quality wise offensively. What did they expose about this defense that, I don't know, that you have concerns about
sure.
as you look forward?
Well, I think the one thing that's concerning to me, and it goes, and I'll go back, you can go back into, different years past where an elite receiver, and we're so used to seeing it from us, from Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith and Jigba, now it's Marvin Harrison, where our best player can basically get open whenever he wants schematically because the coach is calling a great play. Stroud throws a great ball, and then the athleticism of our player to go up and get it or separate. It's like pitch and catch. And what bothered me is that, and I wrote down the stat, I go, Parker Washington, he had 11 receptions catches. And I even took it out. So 11 receptions, 179 and touchdown. I'll take out the fluky 58-yard touchdown, which he basically, two guys missed the tackle, which that'll get fixed. But he's still 10 for 121, right? And no touchdowns. But they threw him the football whenever they got behind us. He won one-on-one, on many occasions. And that's one thing that concerns me is, like, I still don't feel like, I think we're living with this aura of being not only wide receiver U, but we've been DBU for so long with Denzel and Marshawn and, and all these guys, that we put in the NFL in the first or second round that are balling. We thought Burke would be that guy. He has not been that guy. So I would say teams' ability to drop back and make completions almost in some cases whenever they want. Like if we don't do any pre-snap confusion or bring a blitz and he's thrown under pressure and we're playing straight coverage, they can complete the football in many cases from a talented football team like Penn State. They can get those completions whenever they want. Yeah. The other thing that was minutely concerning was, and I'm going to fast forward to that game coming after Thanksgiving. It's a team up north. Is they're going to want to run the football. They saw that they created the template last year by being more physical than who we are. They were stopping the run and they were running the football well, which is very advantageous for them. And up to this point is not the way we've won football games under Ryan Day. Yeah. And so I thought for a little while there, and as the game went on, we continued to button it up, but I thought Penn State with a solid offensive line and some really dynamic running backs could get 4 or 5 yards almost whenever they wanted. And that's mildly concerning because Michigan's offensive line and their offense, to your point, statistically is going to be significantly better of an offense than Penn State even was. Because, you go Penn State of Michigan and watch that game, right? Yeah. So that's concerning to me. And then if they're running the ball successfully, it opens up the boots, the waggles, the play action game, which is what Michigan also wants to do. It's that Harbaugh, San Francisco 49er, pro style, NFL offense it's only going to stress our defense more. So what I want to see, and I think there's some decent challenges ahead of us, in Indiana. Maryland's going to be a challenge. We talked about that, couple of podcasts ago about who they are and what they represent on the stress that they're going to have, how good they are offensively. And it's going to stress us. So I think there's some amazing games in front of us. While we might discount them because they're not against like highly ranked opponents, but they're going to be an opportunity for our coaching staff. That's Ryan Day, that's Coach Knowles, to continue to fix and tweak who we are and fill in those voids of where we're currently getting taken advantage of. Why did Penn State have so much success running the football? And then Larry Johnson and that defense fixes those. And then it's up to that opponent to find those new voids in our defense. And then defensively in the backfield is like, how can we still be aggressive and blitz? And because I think we can get blocked up against a good offensive line just rushing 4. Yeah. So those are my concerns, and I think, but they're very fixable. And I think we have the guys that can step up and make those plays on this defense.
Yeah, and Jim Knowles has said the last couple of weeks, we keep asking. We haven't seen everything yet. By far, there's other things he can throw in there, but we're talking about from a play-to-play basis. Do this defense is a 4-2-5. It's base 4-2-5, 3 safeties on the field, 2 linebackers. But we saw them run Cody Simon on a bunch against Iowa, where they had 3 linebackers on the field. Hey, you and I will talk before that Michigan game. That'll be a little Thanksgiving treat for everybody.
All righty.
Turkey in the oven before the game, you know what I mean, so to speak. But I want to ask you this: do we see down the road a 4-3-4 coming? I mean, do you?
I think so too, because here's the thing. I think if I were an offensive play caller and I know that I can find a gap where I believe my ball carrier is a superior athlete and more physical than the player that's trying to tackle him, which is that nickel corner or that third safety that you're talking about fitting a gap. It's like, okay, so Eichenberg does his job, Steele Chambers does his job, all the defensive linemen do their job. There's going to be a gap that's accounted for where a safety is going to have to fit and tackle. Is it Blake Corum? I know I think it's Blake. Blake Corum, who's a top 10 running back in the country right now statistically, and just week to week flat out can play, where Michigan's going to have the nod in that matchup. So then what do? How can we bring in that body, and that would be Cody Simon, to where one of those 3 guys are now, it's either Eichenberg, Chambers, or Simon fitting that gap, and you go, I feel really good about my linebacker making the play in that gap. Yeah. And so then Michigan, that's the chess match that comes into play. And I think, Jim Knowles in year 1, we've been, blown away by how much success he's had, what the product on the field looks like. And then even statistically, which I know, Joe Klatt, who I mentioned again, reiterate, and every broadcast that we're on reiterates, the success statistically. We're up 20 to 50 spots in most major categories from last year to this year. And you can see that. But it's still, I love the fact that Jim Knowles says, I've got more. But then you also have to, the end goal is doing whatever it takes, and egos aside, and scheme. If I'm a 4-2-5 guy, but I know I have to scrap it to go beat that team up north and go to a 5-2 and play bear to stop that front, I'm going to humble myself as a 25-year college football coach and do what I have to do to win that football game because of what that represents for all that Ohio State's trying to accomplish this year with national championship hopes. Yeah.
And the other thing, the hottest team in the league other than Ohio State and Michigan is Illinois. And Illinois, they got the leading running back, Chase Brown. I mean, they're going to play Brett Bielema a ball if they get to that Big Ten championship game and Ohio State is there. I mean, those will be the last 2 challenges possibly Ohio State faces to get to where it wants to go. And they're so foreign to what they will face once they get to where they want to go. You know what I mean? It's just
exactly.
It is so amazing how basically malleable and diverse you have to be on defense these days, isn't it, Matt? I mean, you guys lined up pretty much in your defense back in 2002 and just got after it, right? But it's
it was, and we'd see Purdue was the one that ran the spread as opposed to flip flop. It's like you saw a bunch of pro style 2 tight end sets or
Miami played you straight up pretty much, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And it's like it was Purdue was the the anomaly, the outsider, and now it's completely flipped on its head. But that being said, I think it's and it's cliche now in football, and most coaches use it because it's kind of coach speak. But it's like you become extremely battle tested by navigating that defensively each and every week of having, so when you finally get there, and because you recruit kids that have played in 7-on-7, camps across this country and played in the spread or against the spread in high school, when you do finally, it's like, okay, we can play bully ball and win the Big Ten. But then we also have those athletes that, because, and I say this a lot to a lot of people, they're like, oh my God, when I was 6'3", 6'4", 225, 230 pounds at Ohio State would not recruit me now because so much of this game is played in space.
Yeah.
And I grew into a space player. I did not enter into or even start early on as a space player. I was an inside the tackle guy. Right. Yeah. And so I do think all these kids have a capability. Otherwise, Ohio State would not bring them in because Ohio State is recruiting a football team to win the Big Ten, play in the Big Ten championship, and win a national championship. And they know that path in many cases is the Georgias, the Tennessees, the Bamas, the Clemsons, the USCs of the world who are in on those same kids.
Yeah, good point. Hey, real quick, before we move on, real quickly, Tommy Eichenberg had 15, was in on 15 tackles in that game. I think 10 solo. But like you and I were texting in the first half, he wasn't having you didn't think he was having a great day, and it wasn't necessarily all his fault, whatever. But I want to ask you this: that 4th and goal play where he just shot through and had the guy in the backfield, and the guy, I'm sure you missed a tackle or two, back in the day.
Of course. Yeah.
Where do you think about that for the next week? Do you think about it for the next 2 seconds as a linebacker? How do you deal with the fact that, man, right there, you were exactly where you needed to be, wanted to be, and that guy ran right through you, so to speak? I mean,
sure,
it was a side kind of tackle, almost like an arm reach. But how do you deal with that?
It's there's an immense amount of confidence that you've called the defense,
right.
exactly what to do. They're in the formation, or they run the play that you think that they're going to run based around your film study.
Right.
So it's like, again, everything's set up for an immense amount of success. And then it becomes, and again, it's your 111. It's mano a mano. It's me versus you. I see it. I shoot it. I go make the play. And a better athlete who's also a highly recruited, individual makes me miss or runs out of my arm tackle. In a game of that magnitude, you can't dwell on that because, another negative or like being emotionally involved, or because of your inability to make a play, you can't be emotionally attached to that result, because on 1st and 10, you can't have a bust or miss another one and then, have that snowball effect happen to you. But you are truly on to the next.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think in some cases now more so than ever, these assets that they have in the program with, sports science guys and psychiatrists, helping you overcome all these things, because you're asking so much of these college athletes now. And you add the fact that he's going to be at some car dealership on on Tuesday with the name, image, and likenesses. They're asked to do, and also have great grades and, play at an All-American level at all times.
Yeah.
It's a lot. But to go back to your point, I did think early on, and go back to the success of JTT. I thought Eichenberg, playing at that All-American level, Penn State identified him as a guy we've got to get blocked.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you saw other people have to step, Latham and Hickman and Steele Chambers, and they had to fit appropriately to make some of those tackles, because Eichenberg was in some cases getting swallowed up, because he was the point of emphasis going into this Penn State game. Was like, he will ruin our run game if we don't get him blocked.
Yeah.
So every double team got up to Eichenberg, or they were using misdirection to kind of have him step one way to create an angle to get him blocked, and it forced other guys to make plays. That's what I'm talking about with the effect that an amazing performance like JTT had against against Penn State on national television. He will pop off the page, and every offensive coordinator from this point forward would go, we got to handle him. And it forces those other great players, Eichenberg again included, and Chambers and others, to step up and make those plays because of the amount of respect that they're giving him, because he can be a game wrecker. Yeah.
And one last thing before I ask you the ending thing here about getting ready for Northwestern. Only because it's what an interesting game. Tennessee's got Georgia this week. Ohio State's got Northwestern. You know what I mean? Which has only one win, and as my buddy Spencer Holbert pointed out, it wasn't even on American soil this year. But getting back, see, I'm looking at this defense and I'm going, okay, Penn State exposed some things, but on that 4th and goal, Eichenberg was there to make the play, but the guy ran through his tackle. Yep. On the long touchdown, they called basically it was basically a zero. Lathan Ransom was up like three yards from the line of scrimmage. They were going after the quarterback. Ohio State ends up with 2 defenders, Tanner McAllister, and I think it was J.K. Johnson, on the guy who catches the ball. And the guy not only catches the ball, but the 2 defenders run into each other sort of and take each other out of the play, and he goes down the sideline, touchdown. Those weren't bad defensive calls. You know what I mean?
No,
but you still got beat on them. So if you're Knowles, what are you emphasizing this week? Because those were 2 of their 4 touchdowns. The other one, of course, came in trash time, as we talked about earlier.
Right.
So they had 1 touchdown where they, that was, I called legit. You know what I mean? From the standpoint of,
well, I would say it's a mathematical equation where Jim Knowles goes, I called up the defense, we executed it almost perfectly, And situationally, I'll say 8 times out of 10 that Eichenberg will make that play, in that backfield, right? So this is the 20 percentile, or those two guys get that guy to the ground and it ends up being a 4 or 5 yard gain, not a 58-yard touchdown, which is game changing, especially on the road. So I think situationally nothing changes. These guys should have an immense amount of confidence in themselves. The coach should have an immense amount of confidence in them and call the game exactly the same because they know based on past history. And that's what's great about this whole is Jim Knowles is still just learning these guys, and they're learning from each other where it goes, dude, I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Knowles, and I know this is like more like kiddie football, and walks up and goes, dude, I'm going to call that defense again. They're going to throw that hitch and you're going to take them to the ground. And that's what you expect because that is so remedial. It's probably some basic coverage. It's just a flat out missed tackle and a bust.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, let's say, I'm not sure y'all ever had a break game in 2002. I mean, some of them should have been
San
break
Jose
games.
State.
Huh?
Maybe
What?
San Jose State.
Maybe San Jose State. But I mean, it was crazy how y'all made a possible blowout into a great game. You know what I mean? No, I'm just joking with you. But that's the way it is turned out. But this week, what are you doing as a player and as a coach? But mainly, take me into that player room. You're a 37 point favorite as you and I talk over Northwestern. You just had a really physical, tough game over at Penn State, but you won it. You're feeling pretty good about things overall. What is the trick for this week of guys showing up and playing at 11 a.m. Central Time, noon Eastern Time?
Well, I would say
game face.
First of all, I mean, I think the goal is to stay sharp. And I hate to say this, I'm not going to discount Northwestern. In the last 5-6 years, they've been to the Big Ten championship a couple of times representing the West. Yeah. So it's a program that I've got a lot of respect for. But I'll say this as a Buckeye and to a bunch of Buckeye fans, I'm sure. But you look at this like a glorified practice. It's getting on a bus or getting on an airplane. Playing your third road game of the season, going there, running out your ones. And executing, and I wouldn't be surprised that if Ryan Day, along with this offensive line, and CJ Stroud, is a little bit more calculated in regards to scripting the game. Let's get plays or guys doing things that I want to see happen more often in a game, which will only benefit us down the road. Or Jim Knowles, maybe on tape in a game scenario, something that we've only practiced. That I don't want to say he's got it up his sleeve, but it's because. Film is everywhere, and you don't want to show all your cards. Right. You can't just execute something one time in the Michigan game and expect it to be executed perfectly. You've got to get it on tape, going full speed against someone besides someone in the same color uniform. That might be the situation. And then I think it's an opportunity for probably your second to get healthy. Mayan Williams needs to get healthy, so can you get away with Jackson Smith and Jake Budd not being in uniform again and not needing him to win this game, which is great, which is only getting him healthy when it actually matters. I'd say Mayan Williams, get Travion Henderson a dozen carries and 70 to 90 yards and a touchdown or two and get him out of the game. You don't need Mayan Williams in this game to win, so you get him healthy. Any other bumps and bruises helps get this team, but I think you do want to keep your edge. So, and that's why I think to a specific game script of, in a perfect scenario, Tim May, Ryan Day, how would I want this to go? Go implement it, come out healthy, keep your guys that are banged up, getting healthy without having to take a game, and keep that edge the best you can and move forward.
All right. Last thing, you're an Ohio State alum. What is it like, just you, in that second half when all of a sudden Ohio State, just like against Iowa, Ohio State, that offense just clicks, 1, 2, 3, you're in the end zone. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., Mecca Egbuka, Travion Henderson around left end, perfectly blocked play against a defense you've been having trouble blocking. I mean, but what is it like? What is the emotion you feel when you see this offense suddenly just get into gear?
Personally, when you don't play well, you go, oh, maybe we're not national championship caliber team because Georgia's really good. So is Bama. You know what those other guys are.
Yeah.
And anytime that you're not rolling, you feel like, we've got some bumps and hurdles to overcome still. But then you do that and you go, oh, dude, we're gonna smoke Michigan. We're gonna smoke whoever we play in the Big Ten championship game, coming out of the West. And we're making the college football playoff, and we have a really good chance to not only win a Heisman, but win a national championship. Yeah. And I think that's the thought and the mindset behind it is, and I don't want to say you jump off the bandwagon because that's not it. You just start to have some doubts about, man, Michigan's running the ball really well, and they're really good too. And then you look at what Georgia's doing and what Tennessee's doing, and you go, oh man, like we can't compete with them playing like this.
Yeah.
And then you do what we do, and in some cases, it's not always going to be perfect. These are college kids. And then you go roll and you go, yeah, we'll spank Georgia. We'll smoke Tennessee, and your confidence comes right back.
Yeah. I was going to say, and I keep reminding people, it's a 4-quarter game, ladies and gentlemen, especially some of these games. It's going to be 4 quarters. Buckle up for 3.5 hours, 3 hours and 45 minutes if it's on Fox. And just, either enjoy it or don't watch. I got my baby brother. Well, he's my baby brother. He's 64 and a half. I mean, he's a huge Alabama fan. He still can't. He has to get up and wander around the living room, in Texas.
I believe
while they're playing. I mean, some people are like that, but you're really missing a show, man. It's, major college football now is crazy. And Saturday was another example of that. And Matt Wilhelm, man, thanks for joining me again, man. We're going to do it again.
My pleasure, Tim.
I've already told people we're going to do it the week of the Michigan game. What do you think? Are you up for it?
I love it. I'm game.
All right, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the best at it. Matt Wilhelm, thanks for joining the Tim May podcast.
Thank you, Tim.